Imagine standing on the deck of a wooden ship in the middle of the North Atlantic with icy spray hitting your face every few seconds. No cabin, no heater, no walls, just open water, freezing wind, and months of sailing ahead of you. Now here's the strange part. The Vikings did this constantly. They crossed to Iceland, Greenland, even North America in conditions that would give modern sailors frostbite in an hour. So how did they survive out there without freezing to death? Before we get into it, quick question for you. If you had to survive a freezing ocean voyage with only what people had 1,000 years ago, what's the first thing you'd want? Drop your answer in the comments, because the real answer might surprise you. Let's start with the obvious guess. You'd think furs, right? Big thick animal pelts wrapped around the body like a walking blanket. And yes, furs were used, but they weren't the main trick. The real secret was something way more clever, and honestly, kind of genius for its time. It was wool, but not just any wool. Viking sheep weren't like the fluffy white sheep you picture today. They had a double coat. One layer was long, coarse, and almost waterproof. The other was soft and packed with warm air pockets. Together, this combination trapped heat even when soaked in freezing seawater. Archaeologist Elsa Ostergaard, who studied preserved Norse clothing pulled from graves in Greenland, found something incredible. The wool fibers were tightly spun and densely woven, almost like natural armor against wind and cold. This wasn't random. It was engineered, just without modern tools. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Wool naturally contains lanolin, an oily substance from the sheep's skin. That oil made clothing water resistant. So even when massive waves crashed over the ship, the wool didn't completely soak through. It stayed warm on the inside while the outside took the hit. Picture that for a second. A wall of freezing ocean water slams into a sailor's chest, and instead of soaking into his skin, it slides off his wool like rain off a coat. That's not luck. That's smart material science from over 1,000 years ago, and that's just the fabric. What about the actual clothing design Vikings layered like they were preparing for battle against the cold itself? A base layer of wool against the skin, then a thicker wool tunic on top, then if you could afford it, a fur-lined cloak fastened at the shoulder with a metal brooch. This wasn't just for style. That brooch placement kept the cloak from flapping open in strong wind, which mattered a lot when one gust could mean the difference between warm and dangerously cold. Their pants were wool too, tucked into leg wrappings called wadmal bands, wound tightly from ankle to knee. This trapped heat around the legs and stopped freezing wind from sneaking up the fabric. Simple idea, surprisingly effective. Now here's something that might blow your mind a little. Researcher Michelle Hayer-Smith, who has spent years studying Norse textiles from Iceland and Greenland, discovered that wool wasn't just clothing, it was currency. Entire economies were built around wool production, because good warm cloth was that valuable. Imagine an entire trade network existing just because staying warm was a matter of survival. So the same wool keeping a sailor alive on a freezing ship might have also been used to buy food, tools, or even land back home. Function and value wrapped into one fabric, but clothing alone wasn't enough. The ship itself played a role too. Long ships were open air, which sounds like a nightmare for warmth, but Vikings used the ship's structure smartly. Rowers sat close together, which created shared body heat in tight spaces. Sailors often slept in leather sleeping bags lined with fur, curled up beneath the raised deck boards, or tucked against the hull to block wind. And when things got really cold, they burned small fires in fireproof boxes filled with sand or clay, letting them cook food and warm hands without setting the ship ablaze. A tiny flicker of fire, surrounded by freezing ocean in every direction. Try picturing that scene animated. It's oddly beautiful. Still, even with all this, cold was a constant threat. So what happened when someone actually started freezing? This is where historian Neil Price, known for his deep research into Viking Age life, points out something important. Survival wasn't just physical, it was social. Vikings relied heavily on group cooperation to survive harsh voyages. Sharing blankets, rotating rowing positions to keep blood flowing, and sleeping in close groups for shared warmth were common practices. In other words, staying warm wasn't a personal skill, it was a team effort. On a freezing ship in the middle of nowhere, isolation could be just as deadly as the cold itself. Kind of makes you rethink the image of Vikings as lone warriors, doesn't it? Out there, survival depended on people looking out for each other, but even with wool, fireboxes, and teamwork, voyages were brutal. Sailors still got frostbite, some still died from exposure. This wasn't a perfect system, it was smart, but survival was never guaranteed, and that's kind of the wild part. They didn't have GPS, weather forecasts, or waterproof jackets. They had wool, wood, fire, and each other, and somehow that was enough to cross entire oceans that terrify people even today with modern equipment. So next time you complain about cold weather with a heated car and a down jacket, just remember, someone once crossed the North Atlantic in an open wooden boat wearing sheep wool and trusting the guy next to him to keep the fire going. Here's the real takeaway. The Vikings didn't defeat the cold through brute strength or magic tricks of history. They defeated it through smart material science, clever clothing design, and human cooperation. They understood their environment deeply and adapted with the resources they had. It's a reminder that survival isn't always about strength. Sometimes it's about understanding the small details, the fibers of a fabric, the placement of a firebox, the trust between sailors, and turning those details into your biggest advantage. If this made you see Vikings a little differently, let me know in the comments what surprised you the most. Hit like if you enjoyed this one, subscribe if you want more stories like this, and if you're curious how ancient people survived other extreme environments, there's another video waiting for you right after this.